There are stories that test the meaning of love. Stories that ask whether power, money, or even science can defeat the one thing humanity fears most: time. Victor Moreau was a man who had everything. A name whispered in boardrooms, a fortune that built cities, and a daughter who was the light of his world. Her name was Isabella, 10 years old, bright, gentle, and curious about everything. Then, one morning, her world collapsed. A rare illness took hold of her heart, and doctors from every corner of the globe came to deliver the same verdict. She had 7 days to live. Victor's empire could summon private jets, scientists, and machines that reached for miracles, but none of it worked. Each day her pulse slowed, each night his hope withered. In the glow of sterile hospital lights, the richest man in the world found himself poorer than he had ever been. Across the city, under a cracked bridge and a torn blanket, slept a boy named Eli Santos. He had no parents, no home, no shoes, but a heart that refused to grow cold. He lived on the edge of the same city Victor owned, yet they existed in different worlds. When Eli saw Isabella's story flash across a television in a bakery window, something within him changed. The sight of her pale face stirred something unexplainable, an ache, a calling, perhaps destiny itself. He did not know her name, but in that moment he made a silent promise. He would find her, and he would help her. 2 lives began moving toward each other, one wrapped in gold, the other in dust, pulled together by a force greater than logic or circumstance. Because sometimes, miracles don't come from power, they come from love. On the top floor of St. Alara Medical Center, sunlight touched the walls through wide panes of glass. Everything was spotless, quiet, controlled. Yet within that stillness, a small girl sat watching rain trace crooked lines across the windowpane. Isabella Moreau was surrounded by everything money could buy: nurses who never left her side, machines that hummed in perfect rhythm, and rooms that smelled faintly of steel and lavender. But none of it could take away the weight of waiting. She kept a small sketchbook by her bed, pages filled with drawings of skies, oceans, and birds she had never seen. Her favorite was the sunrise, each one colored in shades of gold, the way she imagined it might look beyond the hospital walls. Outside her room, Victor Moreau spoke softly with doctors who no longer promised miracles. Their eyes told him what their words did not. There was nothing left to buy, no treatment left to try. As night fell, he sat beside his daughter's bed, listening to her slow, steady breathing. He had built towers that touched the clouds, but could not find a way to touch tomorrow. Across the city, beneath the roar of traffic and the hum of electric lights, Eli Santos stirred from uneasy sleep. Rainwater trickled through the cracks above him, soaking the cardboard that served as his roof. The streets were empty except for him and the sound of the storm. He gathered a handful of wilted flowers he had been trying to sell that day, the last of them clinging stubbornly to color. Every petal felt like a piece of hope refusing to die. At the corner of a bakery, through fogged glass, a television flickered. A newscaster's voice broke through the static, reporting the condition of Isabella Moreau, the billionaire's daughter, who had only 7 days to live.
Eli voce din silence.
Something in the girl's eyes, a softness, a quiet courage, held him still. He felt as though he had known her all his life. Outside, lightning split the sky. And beneath its light, a barefoot boy made a decision that would rewrite his fate. When dawn came, he rose, brushed the rain from his face, and began to walk toward St. Alara Hospital. He did not know what he would do when he arrived. He only knew he had to try. The hospital loomed above him, towering glass against gray sky. At its gates, guards in dark uniforms turned away the boy who tried to enter. They saw only dirt and rags, not purpose. Still, Eli did not leave. He waited through the day, through the rain, until the city lights flickered on. From her window high above, Isabella looked down and saw him, small, soaked, holding a single flower. For the first time in weeks, her lips curved into a faint smile. The heart monitor beside her steadied, its rhythm calm and clear. That moment marked the beginning of everything that followed. Within hours, word reached her father of the boy outside who refused to leave. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Victor allowed the guards to bring him in. The meeting between them was quiet, one child wrapped in blankets of silk, the other in the scent of rain and street dust. But in that silence, something passed between them, recognition, gratitude, an unspoken truth that both had been waiting for the other. From that day on, Eli visited the hospital room whenever he could. He told stories of the city's hidden corners, the laughter under bridges, the color of the markets at dawn, the kindness of strangers who had nothing to give. Isabella listened, her eyes bright with a world she had never seen. Each night she grew a little stronger. And each night he made her the same promise in his heart: he would find a way to save her. The seventh day drew near. Isabella slept more often now, her breaths fragile, her skin pale against the white sheets. The doctors spoke in whispers. Her father paced the halls in silence. And outside those walls, the boy who had nothing began his journey to do the impossible. Eli left before dawn. He crossed the sleeping city barefoot, guided only by faith and a half-remembered rumor of a man called the Keeper, hidden deep within the mountains, who could heal what the world could not. The road soon gave way to mud, the sky to storm. Wind whipped through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Each step sent pain through his torn feet, but he did not stop. Hours became a day became two. He followed a river that wound through valleys until the sound of a waterfall rose above the forest. Behind it, half hidden by mist, stood a wooden door carved into stone. When it opened, an old figure stepped from the shadows. No words were heard, only a silent exchange, a boy's pleading eyes and an old man's understanding nod. Moments later, the child emerged carrying a small pouch of light. Inside were the petals of a flower that bloomed once in 10 years, the silver orchid, a gift said to answer the truth within the heart that carried it. Given with greed, it could kill. Given with love, it could save. Clutching the pouch against his chest, Eli ran. Through rain, through darkness, through exhaustion. Every heartbeat whispered the same name: Isabella. By the time the city came into view, his body trembled from cold, but his spirit burned bright. The hospital lights shimmered like distant stars against the storm clouds above. And somewhere inside those walls, a little girl hovered between life and loss, unaware that hope was already running toward her, soaked, barefoot, and unstoppable. By the time Eli reached the city, night had fallen. Rain blurred the skyline, washing gold light into silver streaks across the streets. He had been gone for days. And somewhere inside St. Hilaire Hospital, Isabella's life was nearing its final hours. Doctors moved in quiet panic, their faces marked by helplessness. Victor Moreau stood motionless at the window, watching the reflection of his daughter's fading light. He had bought everything that could be bought: time, technology, treatment, and yet nothing could hold her here. At that same moment, the hospital doors burst open. A soaked and trembling boy stumbled through the corridor, a small pouch pressed to his chest. His journey had carved exhaustion into his face, but his eyes still carried fire. He crossed the polished floor, each step leaving a trail of muddy footprints. Nurses gasped. Security moved toward him, then stopped. Something in his presence froze them where they stood. Without a word, the boy reached Isabella's room. Inside, the light dimmed to a single glow. The doctors leaned over the bed, their voices fading into one long, flat tone. Eli opened the pouch and removed the petals, soft, luminous, almost breathing with their own life. He placed them beside her, and in the silence that followed, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, for the first time in hours, the monitor flickered. Once. Twice. Then again. The flat tone broke into rhythm. A slow, fragile heartbeat began to rise. The air in the room shifted, the kind of stillness that comes before sunrise. And when Isabella's eyes opened, the entire room exhaled. In that moment, the impossible had happened. A life had been returned, not by wealth or medicine, but by love carried through storm and pain. The boy's body gave way to exhaustion. He collapsed at the foot of her bed, his mission complete. And as the doctors rushed to lift him, a faint smile lingered on his face, the look of a promise kept. Morning came quietly over the city. Golden light stretched across the hospital windows, and for the first time in 7 days, the halls were filled with laughter instead of alarms. Isabella Moreau sat up in bed, fragile but alive, sunlight spilling over her face. Machines that once whispered death now hummed in harmony with her heartbeat. Outside her door, the world waited for news of a miracle. But for Victor Moreau, the truth was far greater than the headlines that would follow. He had witnessed something no wealth could command. A child from the streets had done what an empire of scientists could not. The boy who had saved his daughter slept in a recovery room down the hall, a bandage wrapped around his small wrist, the faint glow of strength returning. And for the first time in his life, Victor understood that fortune meant nothing if it could not be shared. Days passed. The city spoke of the Silver Orchid miracle. Reporters camped outside, cameras flashing, stories twisting the truth into spectacle. But within the hospital walls, simplicity reigned. A healed child, a humbled man, and a sleeping boy who carried the weight of a miracle without knowing its cost. When Eli finally awoke, he found himself surrounded by light, soft curtains, clean sheets, and the smell of rain fading into sunlight. Somewhere nearby, Isabella's laughter rang through the hall, fragile but bright. The world, for the first time, felt right. News of the miracle spread beyond the city. And while many hearts rejoiced, others began to fear. Pharmaceutical executives whispered in glass towers. Soon, shadows moved in silence. Unmarked vehicles, unspoken orders. There were men who wanted to find the silver orchid and destroy its trace, to erase what they could not control. But Victor Moreau was no longer the man who built walls. He became the man who stood between greed and grace. He used his wealth not to hide, but to protect, building a sanctuary for those who healed through kindness rather than commerce. When the forces of greed came for the boy, they met a city united. From hospital staff to street vendors, from drivers to doormen, everyone stood between the child and those who wished him harm. And in that uprising of ordinary people, Victor finally saw the power he had searched for all his life. It was never in money, or title, or control. It was in people who refused to let goodness die. Weeks later, the Moreau estate opened its gates to the morning light. In the garden, beneath trees wet with dew, 2 children stood side by side. One was born into wealth, the other had walked barefoot through storms. Yet in that moment, they stood as equals beneath the same rising sun. The city had changed. Hospitals carried free care for the poor, research centers bore new names, and every corner of the Moreau empire had been rebuilt on one principle: compassion. Eli stayed by Isabella's side as her strength returned. And when she laughed, he looked toward the horizon, the same sky he once promised she would see. The promise had been kept. The sunrise belonged to both of them now. High above the city, the light grew brighter, spilling gold over rooftops and rivers. The world moved on, but the story of the billionaire's daughter and the street boy became a quiet legend, a reminder whispered through generations that true miracles do not need fortune, science, or fame. They only need a heart that refuses to give up.